Margot Benhart et Rita Davis de la Toronto Arts Foundation, qui récompense un artiste, un créateur ou un administrateur ayant fait preuve d'un leadership culturel créatif dans le développement des arts et de la culture à Toronto. Félicitations. Kaitlynn à côté, Tomaselli, pardon. Kaitlynn Tomaselli est d'origine anishinaabe et italienne. Elle est diplômée du programme Acting from Camera and Voice du Seneca College en 2017. Depuis l'obtention de son diplôme, elle a travaillé avec le Sudbury Theatre Center, Native Art Performing Art and imagineNATIVE Film Plus Media Art Festival. Elle participe à de nombreux programmes axés sur la communauté dans la ville de Toronto, notamment en rejoignant le Conseil des jeunes ENAGB, Indigenous Youth Agency, et le Native Child Youth Advisory. Le développement de la communauté dans le domaine des arts occupe une grande place dans sa vie et elle se passionne pour la mise en relation des jeunes et les opportunités qui s'offrent à eux et à elle. Bonjour. Nicolas Renaud vit à Montréal, écrit des installations, des films expérimentaux et des documentaires depuis la fin des années 90. Il a présenté son travail en diverses expositions et des festivals au Canada, aux États-Unis et en Europe. Il est également professeur associé en études autochtones à l'Université Concordia, où il est membre du Indigenous Futures Research Center et membre associé du Loyola Sustainability Research Center. Le film La Nouvelle Rupert, Brave New River, lui a valu le prix du cinéaste canadien émergent au festival Hot Docs en 2013 à Toronto. Au cours des dernières années, il s'est engagé notamment dans une série d'installations et des ceintures de wampum. D'origine mixte, québécoise et autochtone, il est membre de la Première Nation Huron-Wendat de Wendake. Et avant de finir, il a une œuvre au 5e étage, tout de suite après Avatar. Si vous continuez un petit peu, à droite, juste avant les escaliers, une œuvre de lui qui vient d'être installée. À vous.
Thank you, Amélie. Sorry, that bio was so long. To trim that one up. We're going to have a little bit of a presentation just about who we are as imagineNATIVE as an organization and how we are advocating for Indigenous narrative sovereignty and agency, particularly within cinema and media arts. So I've brought a presentation just to kind of give some visual cues for myself and what I want to talk about with the work that we do. The previous edition of the festival just happened. It was our 24th festival. So the next one we offer will be the big anniversary, 25th. It was every third week in October for 24 years. And I think the next slide that will be prompted is the visual trailer that we had to promote the festival. So you'll notice with the dates, one of the things that we maintained post-pandemic was the continuation of having the festival be delivered in an online format the week after. And it's been a good model because we're really mindful that a lot of the communities who, you know, really where the artists are from, they don't have, you know, Toronto is very expensive. It's hard to get to Toronto. It's hard to stay in Toronto for any length of time. So it was really vital and important for us to maintain that level of accessibility. So as long as I can keep it going, I would like to still yet have like a video on demand experience of all of the film works. We can go to the next slide. So yeah, for 25 years, we've been the largest presenter of Indigenous cinema and media arts. And it's international, so we present works from all over the world, Sami communities, Finland, Norway, Russia, works from Australia, New Zealand, Latin America, Canada, US, of course. And the reason we do this work and why it's essential is because for the history of cinema, we have not been tellers of our own stories. So the very common conception of who we are as people, what our values are, what's important to us, our histories, we have never had, in the history of cinema, agency to tell those stories. So you can imagine how full of stereotypes, fallacies, misrepresentations. So it's very, we have certain parameters for inclusion in our festival, and it has to be an Indigenous lead creative, ideally an Indigenous director or an Indigenous artist to be at our festival. We can go to the next. And I just brought this quote of Jesse Wente because we have a publication which is the Indigenous Pathways Screen Protocols, which is a document on our website. You can access it for free. And it's kind of like a starter guide for anybody looking to work with Indigenous artists, Indigenous creators. And it's really like, usually I'll get an email here and there where like, I really want to tell this story and it's an Indigenous one and I just found you and I'd like to do this. And they're usually not Indigenous. So this is like the document on the PDF I will usually send to everybody. So it's a good read and it's important and it's a good starting point. So if you want to go to our website, you can find that there. But this is Jesse's quote. When I talk about narrative sovereignty, what I'm really talking about is the ability of nations to have some measures of control over the stories that are told about themselves. Throughout the entire history of filmmaking, the overwhelming majority of stories told about Indigenous people, both fictional and documentaries, have been told by non-Indigenous people. Next slide. So this is a kind of a brief overview of what we present, because it is a 6-day event in Toronto, multiple venues. The primary exposition of our work is within the TIFF Bell Lightbox, so where the Toronto International Film Festival happens. We're very lucky to have that space. It's very dazzling. It can be a bit overwhelming, and I think it does give the misconception that we have a ton of money. We don't. We get a community rate, but it's a beautiful space. So if the next piece should bring up kind of an overview of the programming. I worked hard on that animation. And I just want to maybe have Kaitlynn and I volleyball this a little bit, because Kaitlynn is our program manager. So literally, she's the one that's like doing the administration and ensuring that all of these things are happening and that the programming team is selected and that we have our jurors selected that are viewing all these works. So we showed 121 programs this year. There were 134 distinct Indigenous languages, 74 Indigenous nations, 41, no, what's that for the second one? I can't see because I'm cutting. Indigenous artists, thank you. 74 Indigenous nations, 41 languages, and that's a huge one for us. In fact, one of our prizes we gave out, it's on another slide, I'll get to those, but we give out 65,000 in film cinema prizes for the winners, and one of the highest is the Indigenous language prize, so someone that does their work in an Indigenous language. It's you talk to any of our communities, and that's the first thing they'll say of what's vital and important, that the work that we need to put our effort into. 14 feature films, 71 mid-length and short films, 21 digital and interactive works, so a presentation of video games, VR, AR, and then we did 15 audio works and 7 exhibitions. So we partner with the galleries in Toronto and do an art crawl, and everybody gets to explore these exhibitions. And maybe, Kaitlynn, if you want to help talk about kind of who we select as programmers, and yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. So hi, everyone. I'm Kaitlynn. I'm the program manager, like Naomi told you. Every single year, as we're doing our lead up to our festival, we open with the open call of submissions. And while that is going on, it's usually around four months, I would say. But we are selecting our programming committee. And what's really important to imagineNATIVE is our Indigenous community and our relationships internationally. So we change our programming committee annually, and looking at ways where maybe we haven't had much representation in the previous year or few years. And then we really try to identify, but work with that community as well on who we are selecting. And then once we get into our programming committee meetings, it is intense, as everyone knows with programming. It's intense to do all the adjudication, but what we really look for is the Indigenous director, as well as a second credit, so a producer or writer has to be Indigenous. And then while we're in these meetings too, what we're looking at is the creative story to the, again, to representation, to the level of expertise. It's really important for us to have a blend of not just emerging, not just established Indigenous artists, but also to have this blend of emerging and established to mid-career as well. But yeah, so that's that kind of the programming selection part of it. And what they take care of is the films and then also our digital interactive pieces. So like the VR, the video games, the mobile games, and our audio. So it's a lot of media that our programming committee is getting. And what we really try to do is like create care for our programming committee who is experiencing all these like tough stories too, is a part of our process. So yeah. Yeah.
It's an important piece is because like not only, you know, you're expecting people to watch, you know, at times quite traumatic things, and you want to make sure you're checking in and allowing for breaks, and having a support system is important. Like at our festival, every day of the festival, we have healthcare workers on site. So if people are viewing works that are triggering, they can go in there and have a professional to talk to. Yeah.
And then also we have Grandma Pauline. Maybe you want to talk about Grandma Pauline?
Yeah, Grandma Pauline. She's our... I'm trying to think what she wants. She has a very specific title. Our cultural knowledge keeper. She's our advisor. So we have an elder on retainer yearly, year-round, and she takes moments to talk with the team and share traditional teachings. But honestly, like a lot of times it's me. She calls me, I call her, and if there's things I need advice on or how do I go about this, she's just like a rock for us. So, yeah.
It's really nice to have like care really rooted within our community. So it's very like appreciative of all this space that Naomi also has instilled within us to feel comfortable to reach out to. So whether it be Grandma Pauline during the festival, the workers there, but we also have the line that we can call at any time too. So there's like many spaces for care within the process.
Yeah, world's hard. It's important that we be mindful and kind and caring. Why not? We're in the arts. We should be doing that. Okay, next slide. So yeah, I just brought some visuals kind of so you can get an idea of what the festival looks like. This is, of course, a cinema. Probably not necessary. Next. This is our indigital space. I'm hoping to rebrand. I would really love to start calling this the Indigital Arcade. Because I think that translates more to what this space is about. It's like go in and you interact with these works. This was a 360 piece that we had, and the turf, I remember fighting about the turf. I'm like, do we really need to put the fake grass in? But I'm glad that Jessie fought for that.
Yeah, the idea is bringing the outside in. You know, when you're growing up and your parents are like, go play outside. So it's like, you're outside playing. But the digital space is this remarkable place where you can also go, it's accessible, safe, and welcoming. You know, again, we are at the TIFF Bell Lightbox, and it does have this blitzy kind of environment. But once you walk into this, it's totally transforms. And every single year we have, like during the pandemic, we weren't able to do it physically, but every single year we have a different theme. And but it really is a place for any digital interactive works that work with where your imagination can go with innovation. And we started this, I think, in 2018. At first was this really small, tiny room that we had at TIFF that wasn't, it was just kind of like an afterthought. And then in 2019, we started a research exploration on like how important it is to make digital works just as much important to film. So that was one of our researching things that we did during the pandemic.
I would say it's probably one of the ways we've been a little more forward thinking in the kind of the ways in which stories are told, and looking at these media art pieces and video games and VR, and it's kind of it's a bit of a brag that, you know, other film festivals, they don't have something quite like this yet in Toronto, and it attracts definitely, just on a very pragmatic level, different kind of funders too. So, you know, this year Sega came in and like helped support this space. So.
Yeah, another thing too about the importance, I would say, is like, you know, film is very accessible to communities as it's just a camera editing software, let's say. But in Indigenous communities and internationally, there's a lot of places with no internet access, no technology support, and all these lack of access. But it really proves to be like how creative and innovative Indigenous peoples are with having that lack of access, but being able to still bring this.
Herculean effort that they can produce with, you know, very limited resources.
Yeah.
Well, you can go to the next. So I just wanted to share this one because we do a series of events throughout the week as well. So we always kick it off with the welcome gathering, and it's, thank goodness for the Maori people. Like whenever you do like an opening event, you want Maori there because they love to, you know, get up, and they're very welcoming and doing the haka. And so this is, representatives from Maori Land Film Festival, who we've had multi-year relationship with. Kaitlynn went this year. The previous year I went before that, and it's just kind of a testament to how important the relationships are, long-term relationships with these other places, because there's not that many of us in the world, like Indigenous-led organizations advocating for Indigenous narrative sovereignty, so we really do support each other. Next. This is The Beat. This has been going on since pretty near the beginning of the festival, and I think originally they had the idea that it would be a place where you could show the video, music videos. And then it's our founder, Cynthia Licker-Sage. She is Indigenous Performing Arts Alliance. She runs the Table-ronde Music Festival. She's got a very music background, so I really feel like she probably was a big proponent of having The Beat and having live performance, live music at the festival. And it's one of the, if you're going to go to a party at imagineNATIVE, this is a good one. Next. Industry days. So this is somewhat kind of relatively new too for imagineNATIVE. I want to say the first one might have been 2017 or 2018. We have a yearly institute which does professional development opportunities for filmmakers primarily. But at the festival, we do like the conferences and the micro meetings and the pitch sessions. So that's all run by our institute team, and it's their space to have these industry day sessions. So this is probably, I think, a picture from micro meetings. Look at, obviously having a great time. So. Next. And here's an example of the pitch sessions. So they pitch to the group, and then the idea gets put on APTM Lumi. And Kaitlynn might be the best one to talk a bit about this one.
So the APTM Lumi partnership that imagineNATIVE has been very, very strong. I don't know how many, since the beginning probably. But the pitch sessions is, there's a morning and afternoon of pitches all day, and they're pitched to the APTN Lumi, but also I think like there's a few others in that space. I'm not too familiar with the orgs off the top of my head right now.
CBC, I think Warner's been there, and Netflix is the main funder of the industry days. So anybody that's looking for content will show up.
And then at the end of the day, there's the adjudication of who's going to be winning the pitch. But then within a quick, I think, year, they produce their web series. And again, this is, Indigenous-run, Indigenous-led directed productions. And then there is the end result of being somewhere distributed, which is really nice. But yeah, the only reason why Naomi said that is because that's my boyfriend. You can watch Tales from the Res on APTN Lumi.
imagineNATIVE is also notorious for people meet imagineNATIVE and collaborate in many ways. Okay, next slide. So Art Crawl, also a long mainstay of the festival, and as I mentioned, we partner with the city galleries. Usually, it started out with the ones just in the building at the 401 Richmond in Toronto, and it was like a space, and but it's definitely expands out. So AGO was a partner this year, and all of the exhibitions are Indigenous curators featuring Indigenous artists. And it's nice because all of those galleries know when imagineNATIVE happens, they program plan, and they got their exhibition ready to go so that we can tour those.
Yeah, and then it's nice because like every year we have new galleries that we explore at the same time. But the Art Crawl event is perfect for art goers. But it's a really, I think like a very community crawl between all of these spaces, and they're generally pretty close, but there's been other years where we've rented buses, but we always sell out for that one. So again, buy tickets if you do want to come.
Right, next. Okay, yes, I just love this. I just wanted to have this one here because that's Alanisa Bomsawin, who is a legend. And her exhibition was part of the Art Crawl this year, and I heard she was quite pleased. So
she has, I think, like 100+ works. So you can find her on the National Film Board. There's a lot of her collection there.
Okay, next slide. I mentioned the awards. So we hustle hard to get sponsorship for all of our awards. Our contributors are like CBC, TVO, Netflix. I don't want to forget anybody, but it's like every single award we get somebody to contribute something so that we can have each of these winners have something that they can then take that money and put into their next project. It's cash in hand. It's a big effort, but it's well worth it. So this year we managed to do 18 awards, 66,500 in prizes.
Another thing is imagineNATIVE is the only Indigenous festival with an Oscar qualifying award. So our live action short film is awarded annually. And whoever is the recipient of that award is able to start their campaign to be considered for the Academy. So.
It's always a fun letter to write. Yeah. There's not very many in Canada that like a festival that has that kind of slide through for your consideration, and we are the only Indigenous festival in the world that has that. Next slide. So year round, the festival's one thing, but then year round we're quite active, and it's again the the mandate is to present these works. So we're really looking forward to this year because it'll be like the first year that we can really put our heads on how do we bring works back out into communities. Last year we partnered with the NFB to bring film and VR tour. Specifically, it was really centered around the VR, which is usually, it's the flip. It's always, you know, the films are more the front-facing thing, but we had Colin Van Loon's work, and this was my old, where I used to work at Woodland. They had a request, like, we want to do this project. We have a very limited time. We're not sure how to do this quickly. And I'm like, my team, we're like 75% of us are Indigenous from our communities. We can just take it. Like, we'll pick our own homes, and we already know who to talk to. We know what the venues look like. We know who will show up, and so that's what we did. So I went to Six Nations. Our Tanisha Richards, she went to Bear River, went to your home community, and then, of course, Colin's community.
Yeah, so for This Is Not a Ceremony, which is Colin Van Loon, in 2017. So every single year we have different partnerships that emerge of like different opportunities. But in 2017 we had the Digital Pitch Prize, and it was at that time just a concept piece. And we had, I think, about 8-9 applications. And Colin Van Loon was the recipient of this pitch, and this was a cinematic VR piece that follows 3 stories within Canada's history that can get brushed under the rug with Indigenous stories. Within, I think it was a 9-year product, even before that they had some more concept, but it was a 9-year product that This Is Not a Ceremony, the VR piece was finally made. We were able to premiere it last year with the National Film Board. And where was I going with this? I forget. But just like the importance of opportunities like this is with our different partnerships is like accomplishments come out of opportunities, which is amazing to say.
Yeah, I mean, in a selfish kind of way too. Yeah. Like, I always make the joke, my family has no idea of what I do for a living. Like, they have no concept of what this work is. So it's kind of nice that we get to do a little show and tell and bring these artworks to our communities, and it kind of inspires future creators too, right? Which is what it's about.
Another thing with This Is Not a Ceremony is that it had 100,000 downloads from Meta, so that's really exciting.
Yeah, it's on Meta.
Yeah. And then the community aspect of it is for us to bring it to our communities, but also, for Colin, that's where I was going with this, it's Colin's community, is that this is, a lot of Indigenous storytelling is like rooted within yourself, but also your community. So it's very important that community is like always the big word that we use, and it's really important for us.
Yeah.
So,
it's a big word, but it's a very specific word, and it's very individualistic, and there's a responsibility that we have when you say you're from someplace, and it's nice to bring it home and have people like, wow, good job. Okay, anyway, next. I just brought these in to kind of trigger my memory that we are funded by Netflix for our institute, and we do a lot of professional development, labs, workshops, mentorships throughout the year. Then one that I wanted to mention that is coming up soon is the Screenwriting Features Lab. It's open in like 3 days, February 12th, and then closes March, do you remember that date? Closes March 18th. So if there's anybody you know that's Indigenous that could access this kind of opportunity, please share. Next. And then, of course, thank you, Miigwech, now onto our funders. These are our operating funders, so we wouldn't be able to do the work. We would not have jobs if not for these people, so thank you. And next. And now Nicolas. So one of the things I said, we try to be a little strategic. We wouldn't have the work we do if not for the artists. So knowing we're coming here to this territory, we want to make sure that we brought somebody from here to talk about their work. And I'll let you take it from here.
All right, thank you very much. Well, I'd like to say first that I was 3 times at imagineNATIVE, but once was online during the pandemic. So twice I went, and it's a great festival. It's a good experience. And even though you say, yes, it's expensive in Toronto and everything, people may not be aware compared to Quebec how much there is a network of Indigenous people in Toronto. It's visible, and it's in all levels of society. It's you know, and at imagineNATIVE, the audience as a high proportion of Indigenous people. You see it, you feel it. So it is something unique that we don't have in Montreal and in Quebec City to the same degree, for sure. So it makes it a very interesting event, definitely.
Well, that's part of the work we do too. Is like I often say, there should be more of us. There should be more organizations with some agency on how work is presented, and so there, I said it out loud.
Great. So I'll say a few things about some of my recent work. Since the theme was narrative sovereignty or something like that, narrative sovereignty with technology or something like that. So I'll try to go down that track a little. So that is a film I co-directed with a friend who's non-Indigenous, and it was an interesting dialogue. It was an interesting collaboration to both think about Canada, what it is, how the land is defined, and what kind of story has been told about the land. So we collected sponsored films. They're like advertisement, like commercial films from the 1920s to the 1970s that were advertising Canada, specifically outdoor vacation destination, you know, to see what kind of discourse is articulated through them, quite subconsciously most of the time, you know, but it's amazing how they could not just advertise a resort or a camp site or a national park. There's always a subtext that they have to talk about their legitimacy on the land. They're building Canadian identity. And it is always that subtext of Indigenous people having vanished. So, you know, kind of the natives have vacated the land so we can have vacations. as if the national psyche, and that's applicable to Quebec as well when I say Canada, as if the collective national psyche is haunted by the presence, absence of Indigenous people, and kind of mentions them, but not mention it. But it was amazing going through these films that I was always present. We can do that more obviously if you take the natural resources films of the same time that the NFB would do or something like that. But we wanted to work with tourism, outdoor tourism films, because they're all about joy. They're all about enjoying the land and you know, celebrating the beauty of the land. But under that, we started sensing, we collected 130 films. We started sensing we could pull the colonial violence that's behind it. So it was more interesting for us to work with that contrast of the joyful family vacation in the forest and on the lakes and rivers, and then the colonial violence of celebrating how we dominate nature and how Indigenous people are either gone or are a folkloric attraction. Like there's an Indian parade in Banff we have footage of, that's for the tourist, you know. Or they are celebrated as useful guides with wilderness skills. There was a lot of that, you know. You can take the special canoe trip for 3 days and you'll be with Indigenous guides who know how to make a fire and catch fish. So when they can be useful staff because they know the land, then they are acknowledged. So we found it fascinating to see how that was articulated. and it speaks about the present. It's still the same. The ideology of dominating nature and imagining indigenous people as vanished, even though they are physically still here. People know that now. But how many times do we hear, oh yeah, but it's not the authentic culture. They've lost their culture. I hear that all the time. It's another way to say they're no longer here. You know, it's same thing in the region here, because the Wendat, we have rights on the land, and now what is résophonique des Laurentides. How many times have I heard people, yeah, but the Wendat, they all mixed, and they go hunt with their pickup truck and all of that, so they're not really natives. Why would they have rights? You know, it's another way that the settler psyche needs to vanish indigenous people. So we can go to the next slide. So we made the film as a diptych, and first it was audiovisual live performance. So Brian and I both had a laptop and a projector. We did it 3 times in Ottawa, and once in Ottawa, twice in Montreal. And we would have some structure, but we would jam. And like, oh, I pulled this image, you pull, and that's how there was no comment. So we let the film speak by themselves, by showing how the same things repeat. Sometimes around the same time, but 2 different locations. Like they'll say the same thing about indigenous people in the Rockies and in Ontario. Sometimes same location, years apart. What they say about like doing a boat trip on Lake Huron in the 30s, and what they say about it in the 70s. And then the film started speaking by themselves, so we kept it as a diptych. And you see here, it's quite blatant, the discourse of these films. Here, not only it's, you know, as Canada taken over Indigenous land, but to almost as a subconscious thing to feel better about it, they have a so-called Mohawk character coming back, even though he's wearing a headdress, and that's not Mohawk.
And his teepee's gone, which wasn't a thing.
Which wasn't a thing. And yeah, would be more longhouse. So that film, they advertised a lodge somewhere in, what is it called? Anyway, the cottage country region between Lake Simcoe and Lake Ontario, in Ontario. And they have this indigenous man coming back, and they show him around, and he's very impressed at what the white man has done with his land. He's very content. It's like, wow, yeah, nice hotel, nice docks, nice activities. So it's, you know, it's very odd thing, but it speaks about something. So then we edited a final film version after doing the performance 3 times. We thought we'll keep the parts we liked, and we edited it as a final film. It screened at RIDM in November for the first time, and got the special jury award for Best Canadian Shorts. But that's one way that we try to subvert the story that was told through these films. You know, it's not directly narrative sovereignty, because we didn't start from scratch, but we took skewed narratives about the land and history and subverted them back by using them. You can go to the next slide. There's a lot of that. We also often see the train. That was when the railway started opening the Rockies in a very early film, with very weird Kodachrome colors, and a lot of you know, feeding animals. Like to me, it's not just about being in touch with nature. There's something about the need to show nature as something tamed, as something that you can master, that you can approach. And I think subconsciously, it's saying the same thing about indigenous people. Don't worry, they've been tamed. You know, so you can enjoy wilderness as long as you can be comfortable about your civilization. And the train, well, it's not just access to the land. The train is the symbol of colonialism. Settlers traveled with the train. Smallpox moved from east to west with the railway. You know, it wiped out the Wendat in the 1600 around Lake Huron before they came here to Wendake. And it nearly wiped out the Haida in the late 1800, you know, and the railway was the advance of colonization to the country. We can go to the next slide. The same film as we saw earlier, at the end, they showed a Mohawk chief to play golf. So we, you know, when you play with archive, the only way you can read archives anyway is from your current context. It's from your present. So of course, we cannot read that image without thinking about the Oka crisis. One of the most important event of indigenous resistance in the last few decades. Because a mayor wanted to build a golf course on Ganangaraga land in Ganazatake. So in retrospect, to see people celebrating how a Mohawk man could learn to play golf, it's very strange sarcasm, and we often have nature looking at what strange things are humans doing. We can go to the next slide. This again, it's, well, you may encounter indigenous people, but they'll be there at your service. So you can buy a nice but cheap woven basket from Mi'kmaq people in Gaspé, or they can be your guide for salmon fishing. You know, we have to remember that at the time, all the way until the 80s, 90s, La Sûreté du Québec, the provincial police, was sent on the Mi'kmaq regularly if they fish salmon, you know, and yet it's their rivers, and they've lived in harmony with the salmon for hundreds of years. And that culminated in the 80s with René Lévesque sending a final big raid with the SQ on the Mi'kmaq and say, you're not gonna fish outside of our rules, you know, while they were doing nothing for the commercial fisheries, depleting the salmon population in the Gulf everywhere. You know, what the Mi'kmaq are taking is a small slice of Atlantic salmon population. So again, we cannot expect that all audience will make these connections, but we made the film talking about these things. What does it mean when we look at that image in relation to the history we know today and the relationship with indigenous people? And we know that some people will make connections. Like we have footage of rich kids playing with bears who are chained to the neck, and then the bears cannot, you know, escape, but they try to feed them, and it's a very sad image. And we had someone, Anishinaabe, in the audience once, and that was the thing that stuck with her the most, because she said she had stories in her culture about bear, and we have similar stories in the Wendat culture about bears kind of being human. They're just human with a different shape. So you treat them, well, with all animals there's no hierarchy, but bears in particular were supposed to be very close. And you don't hunt bear at just any time, and you respect them and everything. So this image of playing with chained bear cubs was for her the most dramatic representation of what we were trying to do. And we didn't think about that, but her culture, her story, what she brought to the image, pulled out meaning out of it. So that's what we were trying to do with those things. We can go to the next one. Now that is to speak sometimes more literally about today. So they talk in the West in the national park. I think that was in the Saskatchewan. They say, thanks to Parks Canada, we've saved the buffalo. You know, they're not saying who made it extinct. And then they are fenced. They talk about the fence, that it's to protect them, and that then they'll preserve the buffalo like that. You know, sometimes we could juxtapose whatever footage we want. There's always something happening. But here we were being literal by having a caribou on the other side while they're talking about the fence buffalo, because that's what's happening now. Quebec government doesn't care about the woodland caribou going extinct because of the forest industry lobby, because of logging. They don't want to protect the caribou habitat. And what they're doing when there's a few left alive, like in Abitibi and in Charlevoix, they put them in fences to protect them, and then they keep destroying the forest around. You know, so to have this discourse about the buffalo in a film of the 1950s, referring to an extinction in the 19th century, and then showing the caribou to think about what's going on today was our way to make the film archive speak about today. All right, next one. Well, in the end, we thought the last part, we have three chapters in the film. The last part is called Controlled Progress and Extinction. So we think that the logic that is exposed through how the land is represented is a logic of extinction. And that's what we're living right now. So in the last part, we mostly see things that are disappearing now. So we see more salmon, buffalo, caribou, glaciers, all things that are disappearing. Cod, a lot of images for vacation film in Gaspésie. They would show, like, you see mountains of cods that they're drying on, you know, we know that no longer exists today. There was the depletion of cod stocks in the Gulf. And then in a film about northern Manitoba, to take the railway to go see Hudson Bay and polar bears and all of that, they also celebrate science, and the Canadian Army is doing experiments. It's an early 60s film for what they call cosmic rays, that they're studying cosmic rays. We never understood what they were talking about. But we were finishing the film while every day in the media there was that crazy thing about balloons in the sky. And who's watching us? And who's spying? And could someone have, you know, better technology than us? And this craziness of science and technology as a thing of control that can also turn against you at some point. So that's why we worked with those kinds of images. But again, they're all from promotional films for vacation in Canada. You can go to the next one. So a short film I made with Florent Volant, thanks to the National Film Board. They have the like project of doing film portraits of the winners of the Governor General Awards for the Arts. So they're just 5 minutes film, you're very limited, but you're free to do whatever you want. So Florent was getting Lifetime Achievement Award in music, and I didn't want to make a film. Also, I don't know his music that well since Kaitlynn. I liked Kaitlynn as a teenager, but after that I did. But I was like, Florent, there's like thousands of hours of stuff about you and your music out there. Do we need to make 5 more minutes? Like, no. So what do you want to talk about? I said, the caribou. All I want to talk is the caribou, because that's my culture. That's my people. If we lose the caribou, part of us is lost. So we can go to the next slide. So we managed to get, it didn't have any in Montreal, but through various connections to get mittens, moccasins, and snowshoes that were all made of caribou hide in sinew. So through the film is walking through the snow and everything, but the caribou is always present. You can go to the next slide. We couldn't film caribou. I had 3 days of shooting. We couldn't go to Labrador, where he grew up. We went to Eco Museum, the zoo of McGill University, west of Montreal, where they have a couple rescued caribou there. And I thought, this is so boring. Why am I filming a caribou through a fence? But then Florent started saying, and we were recording, wow, it's sad through a fence because they're nomads like us, like the Innu. And at that moment, the caribou turned to him And they locked eyes and they looked at each other. And I think that, now first we don't hear about the caribou, but the only story we hear is like the economy and how much a tree is worth, and you don't want your 2x4 to cost more, so we need to, let the logging industry do whatever. We don't hear the story of what the caribou is for old culture, for old people. And, narrative sovereignty is about that too, is telling the story that matters in people's lives. And the story that matters around the caribou is not how many trees we can cut. It's that if they disappear, for the Innu, it's part of the language, it's how they hunt, that dreams are involved in hunting, part of the music, part of the drum beats are connected to the caribou hunt. All of that, it's all of that going. So that's what he talks about in the film. Next slide. Thanks to the NFB, I could do things that I cannot do on my own usually because I'm not that good with digital stuff and technology. So at the end, I wanted a big herd of caribou that we don't know if it's a dream of the past or a dream of the future, if we succeed in protecting them. So it's all made up in post because they have a good team of special effects and graphic design. So first, Florence sees them, and then next slide. Then they vanish in a fog of snow and streaks of northern lights. So it was quite well done. I liked it. It didn't look cheap, but that that's the kind of thing that is really fun to do when a big institution like the NFB open their door and let you do something. Suddenly you have these means that you didn't have before. I just brought archive footage of caribou. A shot of Florent walking in the frame. I'm like, let's make that look real, and it did. Next slide. Okay, so that's before we play it, I'll just say it's documentation of the recent wampum work I'm doing. I started it 2 years ago here at Oeil de Poisson. Part of the exhibition, collective exhibition, was called Hiandawa. It was a mix of artists from Quebec City and artists from the Wendat Nation. And that was my first version. And then I did 3 since then, where I keep developing this way of working with wampum in video projection. I have another kind of version of it upstairs on the 5th floor now, but it's not with video because we couldn't do video projections in the permanent collection. It's just light boxes and a wampum hanging in the window. But what I'm trying to do is to use video to kind of subvert an old wampum belt made by the Wendat here in 1678, but it was a Christian wampum. It's the convert. They were converted by the missionaries, and they made a wampum with prayers in Latin that the missionaries would write down for them. So I make wampums and I project the old wampum on it, on the white beads of the wampums I make. That's before like the old wampum appears on it. But I put crystal beads into it. These are light boxes in which we see the old wampum there. It says, the Huron pray for the virgin who shall give birth. And then, see, I project that wampum on the wampum I made. And then it's like the message is fragmented into just light, because through the glass beads, they are faceted, they have angles. So it's the idea that how digital light messages encode something, and it can encode a Catholic prayer or it can encode something else, but that suddenly it goes back to pure light and diffracts all the colors and everything and reconnect with the spirit in wampum. So that's what it does on the wall when it goes through the glass beads and it diffracts the light, and that's seen from behind. So that symbol is called a console fire, where everyone's words can come together in one voice. And what I like is that the shells I use, they look like amber from behind. So almost like a fire that you just have to blow on it and it will light up again. So to me, that's the way to use light to kind of suggest that we can go back to the Wendat way of thinking, and get past what Catholicism has done to our mind and culture. Could go on, but that's enough for now. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to leave space too for any questions that might have been percolating since we've started. But thank you so much, Nicolas. It's really impressive work. Yeah.
Thanks, and thanks for inviting me
to
this.
Yeah. Is there any? Oh no! You're done. We're done.
No, we have time for one question.
One question. Is there anybody that has a question for us? Right here.
Thank you so much for this presentation. You touched a little bit on it, but I was wondering if you could tell us more on who's your audience. Who is your current audience, and who would you like to reach more?
That's a very good. That's a very good question. I don't have an audience in mind, but I always think that if an Indigenous audience doesn't connect with it, I did something wrong. So that's one basic thing. The other thing also is Naomi talked about accountability to the community. I don't live in Wendake, but I built connection through the years, and part of my family lives there. And when they see me talking about wampum and stuff like that, even though I do my own thing and I do my research, and there's that moment where I think, could I stand in front of the community and say what I'm saying right now? It's like a check. It's not just your artist ego. You can't. There's got to be accountability.
And my easy answer is everybody. No, but it is true, because I'm very, the audiences that we need to reach, it has to be everyone, because the way that I look at it, for decades upon decades upon decades, there's only been one singular version of our stories told, and it's been very contrived, and it's been very systemic, and it's been done with purpose and intent. And if that was me and I was on the receiving end of that, I would be pissed. So you need our stories. So everybody needs our stories. You need to see these other angles. We have beautiful stories to share, beautiful philosophies, concepts, ways of being that I think we could all do to hear.
Yeah, I would add that there's more and more people in general who are interested. Since I'm a prof at university, I see it with the new generations of students. All those who are non-Indigenous and take Indigenous topic courses, they see that something makes sense about the way of relating to the land and relating to each other and society, and the way of thinking of politics and responsibility as leadership. They see that it makes sense in the mess that the world is today, and that there's something to learn from Indigenous cultures.
I would add that from my experience of visiting imagineNATIVE and spending 4 days non-stop watching movies, it was a very transforming experience. The storytelling is very, 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 very inspiring and very grand. So I invite you, everyone, to go to visit imagineNATIVE as soon as you can, every year, and to inform, but also to get touched by these amazing stories that are very, very important. So thank you for your work, for your leadership. Thank you for your leadership as well. It's an amazing work you're showing today. Thanks, everyone. On va faire une pause de 10 minutes, puis on se retrouvera après avec Marie-Ève Levasseur et Valérie Roberge. Bonne pause.